Hey there, everyone. How you doing? Good evening. Lee Stranahan. Nice to see you. Hope you're having a good night. I thought I'd talk about something slightly heavy that I've been messing about the edges of for a while in my talking and on my radio show. And I want to talk about the idea of altered consciousness and how it affects the politics of today. And already that sounds heavy, but it's not as actually heavy as you might think. So let me try to explain it. But part of what's heavy about it is that when you're talking about altered consciousness, you're not just talking about adding a little bit of knowledge to the knowledge you already have. So, for instance, if you cook already, I'm going to use an analogy here. If you cook, and I say, do you know how to make an omelet? And you say no, and I show you how to make an omelet, I've not altered your consciousness. I've added information to the information and the worldview that you already had. In other words, you knew that eggs existed. You were aware of cheese and mushrooms and ham or whatever you put in your omelet. I like everything, and you were aware of pans and cooking, and I'm just adding to your knowledge. Consciousness altering has to do with changing your perspective on something in such a fundamental way that things seem new to you. And that's why some of the metaphors that we have right now in our modern world of politics, woke, red-pilled, and those seem different. People who are red-pilled are not woke, right? Woke is a left term, we think. Red-pilled is a right term, we think. But they both describe the same phenomenon, consciousness altering, right? Think about it. They're both ways of describing awakening. And some of this relates to Buddhism. And Buddha, the term Buddha means the awakened one. It's not a formal name. I've talked about this a little bit before. Just like Christ was not Jesus' last name. Christ means the king, right? Buddha, Gautama was the first Buddha. And that just means the first awakened one. So, this analogy that I was just giving you, let me explain how it relates to a normal Western concept of religion versus Buddhism. So, I'm a big fan of the British philosopher, writer, lecturer, Alan Watts. I've been listening to his stuff for a long time. He describes this very well in a number of his pieces, some of which I've retweeted over the years recently, because I've been thinking, this has been on my mind in one form or another for a while. And he talks about how Buddhism is hard for people in the West to grasp at first sometimes, because it's not a religion in the sense that religion is used by people in the West. I'll say that again. Buddhism is not a religion like you've got Christianity and Islam and Judaism, let's say, and you've got different sects or different varieties of Christianity, you know, Protestant, Catholic, Episcopalian, whatever. Buddhism is not like you're Episcopalian, you're Catholic, you're Jewish, or you're Buddhist. Buddhism has to do with consciousness altering. And one of the things Alan Watts says in some of his lectures is that it's equivalent to modern psychotherapy. Now, let me give you the visual look here. this relates, and he talks about this in some of his lectures. Consciousness altering, in a sense, is like that optical illusion that you may have seen, and if you haven't, you're about to now. Have you seen this optical illusion before? This is the one where, look, what are you looking at? Are you looking at an image of a goblet, or are you looking at two people about to kiss? Now, whatever you saw first, you're not wrong. If you see it as a goblet, that's what you see. But shift your perspective for a second, and it is two people about to kiss, and vice versa. If you saw it as two people about to kiss, shift your perspective, it's a goblet. They're both correct. And believe it or not, this relates to modern politics. And there's a reason that the term woke and the term red-pilled mean the same thing, even though it seems like they're from diametrically opposite views. People think of left and right as different. And one of the consciousness-altering things about Buddhism is the Yin Yang Symbol. They're oppositions that make up a whole. They're opposites that make up a whole. In other words, you don't get the peak of a wave. There's no such thing as half a wave. You don't get the peak of a wave without the trough of a wave. There's ups and there's downs. Left only exists in relationship to right. And when people talk about people politically falling for the illusion of left and right opposition, they're correct in a way that a lot of them aren't aware of. The wakingness part, the red-pilled part, is seeing another way of putting what I'm putting is consciousness altering, is seeing something that you've seen 1,000 times in a new way. Okay? Think about that. Consciousness altering is where you, and it often happens quickly, like waking up. It's seeing something you've seen 1,000 times, but in a new way. And I'm going to say that everybody on the left and right has been going through this experience recently. And specifically what they're seeing is they're seeing our political system, politics, and our society in a fundamentally new way. And that process, and this, by the way, explains why everyone's so fucked up right now, and why there seems to be this tension, because it's disorienting. You follow me? Seeing things in a new way is disorienting because you were used to them in one way, and now you're seeing them differently. Everybody on the left and right is going through a similar thing. You're starting to see society and the media and politicians in a new way, whether you're on the left or the right. They're both describing the same phenomenon. Worldwide, this is what's happening. It's not just in the U.S. It's obviously everywhere. And the COVID thing has woken people up. People use those terms, right? And Russiagate woke a lot of people up. Now, what's going to wake you up, whoever you are, you specific person? You might not be you. You might be your cousin or whoever. Whoever is not woke right now, who's never not had this realization. And by the way, there's layers to this realization. And I believe that because it's very hard to to go from where people were to really seeing reality in this different way fully, instantly. That's really disorienting. And so we tend to do it in stages where you get certain aspects of things. And as somebody who's been looking at and thinking about this for a while, I think in a sense, I'm a little further down this path than some people. And I see people, and the people who fell for QAnon, for instance, were what I will call semi-woke, semi-red-pilled. And I've talked about this many times before. They got part of it, but they didn't get all of it. So you see why I said this is kind of heavy, but I think hopefully I'm explaining this in a way that a number of you are following it. It makes some sense. Because as soon as you're talking about consciousness altering, it's a tricky topic. Because some people will hear it and they won't get it because they're literally not capable of getting it at that moment. I'm not saying they're not capable of getting it ever. I'm saying maybe they're too early on their path to fully get it. And so these things tend to happen in layers. And I know a lot of people are impatient and would like things to happen quicker, but tough. Things happen at the pace that they happen at. And they happen for other people at the pace that they happen for other people. And one of the things on interpersonal relations, whether you're dealing with a friend, a family member, a loved one, a lover, whoever, is I think it's very important in interpersonal relations to allow other people to grow at their own pace. And I'll say that again. I think personally, my experience is that it's important to allow other people to grow at their own pace. You can't let your rate of growth determine other people's rate of growth. And don't act impatient or angry or jerky because someone else is growing at a different pace than you are. Allow them to grow at that pace. Especially if your pace is a little quicker. Remember, there were people who were quicker than you. You follow me? And if they were a jerk to you, it wouldn't have helped you grow. So in politics right now, this is why I said last night when I was talking about the Joe Rogan and Russell Brand videos, both guys who I think would get a lot of this stuff. And by the way, psychedelics in general, if you've ever taken acid or mushrooms or mescaline or any ayahuasca, any of that kind of stuff, and I've done psychedelics before, not for a while, but I've done them before, and I know that experience. If you've had that experience, it is a consciousness-altering state because you see tons of things. You see maybe your thumbnail or your neighborhood or your friends or your face in the mirror. By the way, looking at yourself in the mirror while on psychedelics might not be a good idea. But I'm just saying, it allows you to see things that you've seen 1,000 times in a new way, instantly. Religion does have this effect. And what I was getting at before is there's a consciousness. You can approach Christianity, let's say, in a consciousness-altering way or in a checklist way. Does that make sense? You can think of Christianity just as a list of things you're supposed to do. It's like a list, and you check them off. Okay, I do this, I do that, I do this. Or you can think of it as a consciousness-altering experience. And the deeper level the one that sticks more, the one that has more depth to it, is the consciousness altering one. Does that make sense? And this is why we get a lot of people who are very shallow, not just about Christianity, but about religion in general. They haven't really gotten it, if that makes sense. They hadn't had the consciousness altering experience. And there's elements of this, they're in the scriptures. And I'm not one of those people who quotes Bible verses a lot, so I'm not going to quote them now. But if you stop and you think about it for a little bit, and one of the things that is good to think about is the William James, the philosopher, as opposed to his brother Henry James, the novelist. William James wrote a book, essay, whatever, somewhere in the middle, called The Varieties of Religious Experience. And he described different types of religious experience. And if you're a sort of intellectual person, you might want to look that up and start to look into that a little bit and see what he was talking about there. Because it relates to some of the stuff we're talking about. And for a certain kind of person, if you're philosophically minded and you like reading stuff from old English dudes, then you might enjoy that. But in politics right now, this is why we've got woke and red-pilled. And this is why things, when people have a sense that we're in a unique era, I think you're right. I think your instinct is correct. Some people, I think, falsely interpret it as, well, we're at end times or whatever. I don't think so. I don't believe in that concept, actually. And I understand the appeal of it for some people, but I actually, if that's, it's like death in general, which is, by the way, is part of what Gautama, the Buddha, was dealing with, was the concept of death. And it's obviously a fundamental question for religion. But part of the thing about death is, aside from the general unknowability of it, that you want to talk about consciousness altering, try dying. But on the other hand, and Alan Watts talks about this in his essays, try being born. The concept of you dying is very difficult for people to fully integrate in their own lives. But so is the concept of once you weren't here. The idea that you won't be here at some point in the future is difficult for people to fully integrate. But so is the idea that they once weren't here. Just as you will die, you were born. And that means that once there was no you. And one of the things that Alan Watts talks about, and it's a general Buddhist concept, is the concept of who were you before you were born. And again, that's fairly heavy, but it's an interesting concept, and it's a consciousness-altering concept that was there an essence of you before you were born? Because people have an easier time accepting that the them that exist will somehow continue on in some life after death. Does that make sense? That's for some reason easier for people to accept. That makes more logical sense to people than the idea, because a lot of people would go, well, that's dumb. Before you were born, you were nothing. Well, a lot of people would argue that's what happens after you die, particularly if you people who've seen dead people, that there's nothing. And by the way, it's one of those areas where mechanistic atheism gets things slightly wrong. I say slightly wrong because it's not entirely wrong. And once you remove the spiritual completely from the equation, that's why I said mechanistic, that creates all sorts of problems. And that was part of the problem with communism, socialism, coming out of this 19th century mechanistic view of the universe, where it's all billiard balls and causation. This thing causes that. And there's no spirit. Again, it's heavy. Sorry. I should have had everyone put something under their tongue before I did this, but think about this in terms of the way we see politics right now. We really are at a, and by the way, let me explain it in not woo-woo terms, but very practical terms. What's happened is communications technology in the form of your phone. Everyone's got one of these now, and mine has this groovy case. But the invention of the iPhone or your Android or whatever you got, this communications technology, this ability for all of us to talk. I can do a live stream and you can listen to it. That's really weird. This was inconceivable even 20 years ago, this technology. This has ripped the lid off of the world, in a sense, because now everybody can talk about things on a much bigger scale. And we see the media lies, for instance, and we see how they suppress information, and we see how they get things wrong. And this technology that everybody's kind of trepidatious about too, and we wonder what it all means, it's allowed people around the world to suddenly see other people, government, communications, media, journalism, all in a new way that literally wasn't possible before. And that is consciousness altering. So when you're able to see in real time how the world really works, does that make sense? If I said that, you know, and a lot of these things get talked about on a level and people identify with them. And people clearly identify with this of all sorts of different ages, races, ethnic, cultural backgrounds. But the trick for us, for you and I right now, is in the midst of this disorienting change to try to stick to things that are real and not be distracted or fooled by other people. And I would advise you to go to YouTube and look up Bill Hicks' Only a Ride. The comedian Bill Hicks, who's been known to take a hallucinogen, he's passed away. He's gone, but he's not gone. Go look at him on YouTube. And he talks about that. And he says, the ride is very realistic. It's full of chills and thrills. And it seems real. And occasionally, someone comes and says, hey, don't worry. It's just a ride. You don't need to worry about anything. It's just a ride. And we kill those people, he points out, because that's true. People coming through telling people, the world, hey, this world you see is an illusion. But again, let's use that Buddhist concept of opposition equaling unity, opposites equal unity. It is an illusion, the terms Maya, because Gautama was Indian. A lot of people think of Buddhism as Chinese, and it's had a big impact in the East, in places like China. But Gautama was Indian. And so Maya is a Sanskrit word, I believe. And it describes a certain kind of illusion. But the illusion, there's no contradiction here. There is illusion, but there's also reality. And all of this is real and an illusion. It's both. And again, don't get, if that's blowing your mind, man, you know, have some oranges or something. Get in the chill out tent. And all I'm saying is, we, all of us, you and I, are trying to navigate through this. And we're dealing with consciousness-altering things. Even the response to the COVID-19, even the COVID-19 situation itself illustrates a ton of stuff about this. And I believe it's clear to me, and you're going to think whatever you think, but it's clear to me that people are advancing and their consciousness is getting more attuned with reality. In politics right now, we have a practical problem, which is I'm almost done for tonight, for now anyway. And I'd love to hear your comments, by the way. One of the amazing things about this technology is that you can leave a comment, we can have a conversation, and I'd like that. One of the interesting things now is that by necessity, once you realize that the Democrats and Republicans, it's true in one sense that there's not a lick of difference between them. And where they unite is on issues of war. Notice Democrats and Republicans, who may disagree about lots of stuff, seem to agree when it comes to war. You might want to think about why that is. But the problem is, once you realize that illusion, where the hell do you go? Practically. Einstein once said, you can't solve a problem at the level of the problem. Think about that. That's pretty heavy, too. And Einstein, may have known a thing or two. You can't solve a problem at the level of the problem. So I'm going to say, to conclude here, in a sense, you can't solve the political problems we have at the level of the current political system that we have. And then people want to go, well, so what do you... And the answer is, I don't know. I'm not there yet. And I'm not going to get there alone. I'm only going to get there with a lot more people, a lot more consciousnesses, all wanting something different and better. And if you have pierced the first layer of the illusion and see that the Democrats and Republicans are similar, are exactly the same in one sense, and that's true. And then you've started to grasp that there are still differences between the Democrats and Republicans that are significant in some ways. Both embracing contradiction and that unity of contradictions I was talking about. If you look at the Yin Yang Symbol, that is illustrating that. The black and white, the opposites, and a wave in between them. You need both. So where's this going? I don't know. I'm going to make myself a breakfast sandwich because I'm good at that and I like them. Anyway, so I know it's a little heavy, but hopefully practical and sums up some of the things I wanted to say. What I'm doing as we go through this journey is I'm working on teaching stuff that I know how to do, and I'll be doing that. And it is a weird time. It's not just you. Everybody's experiencing it, and a lot of people are noticing it. Anyway, till next time, I love you guys. I'll talk to you later. Bye.